We hit to a couple of different fields tonight with Ted Nesi, who's, well, playing on every field in the state. Yes, he runs the digital reporting and a whole lot more here at Eyewitness News. Well, not here at Eyewitness News, because this is my RI-TV in Dan York State of Mind. But as you should be aware, we are affiliated with Eyewitness News because we're owned by the same company. Did you know that? It is amazing to me sometimes how little people know about media. But why would you? You're working for a living, for crying out loud. You know, you got enough to do to pay the bills. I get it. Anyway, Ted's here. Kind of on a last minute, he's kind of pitching in to talk about some stuff that's been on the top of my mind and a concern for yours, so we'll get after that. Toot sweet. But in the meantime, let us check the rundown and see what's on my state of mind this evening. It's not about cars, boom, boom. Who sang that? Cars, doom, doom. Steve, who sang that? I don't. Cars, doom, doom. You know what? Was it the Cars? I don't think. Anyway, I'm sounding like Clay Pell. That's what that's about. And so is this. The theories on his candidacy abound throughout the chattering class. In the meantime, down in Kingston, the faculty just still doesn't get the armed police thing, and they protest, I think, too much. We'll discuss that for a minute. And did you know that's coming? Yes, mark it in your calendar, May 1st. And what's better than that? Ha! Woo! Love it. Love this time of year. Let's dig in. Here's what we got. It's not about cars. Boom, 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 boom. So anyway, Clay Pell, this kid, you know, here's the headline. He lays out a strategy for rebuilding Rhode Island economy. It's all, it's about strengthening education. It's all, you know, it's $1 million here, $5 million here, this program here, that program there. It's all the typical programmatical nitpicking that goes along with program campaigns. He's been under the radar screen for a while since he lost his car, and I got to give the press a little bit of credit. They went and to a press conference today that he had, first time he came out of the, you know, car closet, so to speak, in quite some time. He does about a 20-minute presentation on his ideas, and then he does a Q&A with the press, and he goes about 7 or 8 minutes before somebody asks about the car. But Steve Clankin from the WPR newsroom asked him about the car very respectfully and said, you know, so any thought about wrapping up this car thing? And here was his predictably clumsy response.
Well, I believe that the car has been picked up by the insurance company, and that what matters in politics really shouldn't be cars. That what politics is about ideas. It's about helping people, and it's about laying out a vision for how we're going to transform the economy of this state. We have not purchased a new car. We have the rental car from the insurance company, and we will purchase one in due course. My focus right now is on building a plan and showing the people of Rhode Island, how we're going to transform the economy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, what happens if you ever have an idea about a car, Clay? Politics is not about cars. It's about ideas. When this kid is thrown a question that requires versatility, it's very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Look, he's a single-digit pollster right now, at least in the Brown poll, but there's a lot of bravado going on here. I played you the Newsmakers cuts from that excellent show with Ted and Tim on this past weekend, where Bob Walsh, the executive director of the National Education Association, has proffered a 40% voter turnout for Clay Pell in the Democratic primary, which has caused a lot of conversation. Let's move on to this little ditty. The professor has been refuted. Wendy Schiller, the Brown University professor, who waxes poetic sometimes and a little bit out there some days. She's pretty good on the national scene, but I often say these local professors ought to do some local diligence before they opine on local matters. However, she's a good egg, and I enjoy her, and she was on WPR Morning News yesterday morning, and I played this for you yesterday, but I want to play it again because it caused a Twitter conversation, and I'm not big on Twitter conversations, but this one was fascinating. First, here's what the professor said about Clay Pell's candidacy.
I just don't think the Clay Pell campaign, frankly, is a serious campaign. I don't think he's got enough experience. I think the people who are backing him are essentially using him as leverage against Tavares. In other words, the unions want to make sure Tavares doesn't go too far to the right. They want to make sure that Tavares is going to be good for them. So they've got Claypel in there, and they're going to back Claypel until they're really confident Tavares is going to be good for them. And then I think they're going to withdraw their backing and support Tavares. I don't think this is a long-term campaign.
So I tweeted out that audio, and I called it the rabbit theory. You know, that he'd run as a rabbit, accumulate as many votes as he could, and then peel off. I was an old runner. Don't laugh. I know I'm chubby now. But, you know, when I used to run the mile, there'd be some kid out there that was trying to set the pace, and then he would, you know, fall off. Or the professional racers do that all the time, right, to set world records. So I kind of likened that he was going to run. Schiller's idea is he'll go for 3 laps and then peel out, and then the NEA will shift behind Tavares. Hey, it's all part of the crazy season known as politics, right? But, after I tweeted that out, here's what followed. Can we show this, Steve? We have this graphic. After I tweeted out the rabbit theory, Bob Walsh of the NEA wrote, being in a position to know Professor Schiller's theory is nonsense. Then Professor Schiller got into it, and she said, are you saying there's no chance you'd switch your endorsement to Tavares if Pell drops out? Which is kind of a funny way to ask the question. But Walsh comes back and says 0.0, like Dean Wormer. And Gina and Angel have higher chances of dropping out of the race. And I'm thinking, why would Gina and Angel drop out of the race? Gina's amassed $2 million. She's all in. And Angel is the mayor of Providence, and he's pretty competitive. You know, unless he's jammed up criminally, and I think there's a low chance of that happening, and Gina is going to run the whole... What's he talking about? There's no better spinner than Bob Walsh. We'll talk to Ted about this coming up in our next segment. I'm interested in what his take is. Crazy stuff. All right, next item. Speaking of crazy stuff, come on, guys. Will you knock it off? Here's the headline that we talked about a while ago, a week or so ago. You or I to move forward with plans on arming the campus police. But of course, you have to have, isn't it wonderful at our institutions of higher learning, the diversity of theory and opinion, and you know, I guess we got to continue to promote that. You know, it's all about the First Amendment. Here is a sociology professor, Judy Van Wyck, who told Eyewitness News, oh, bad idea.
We don't have a crime problem here at URI. We've never had a serious incident on campus that would merit something like taking this kind of action. We, as a state and as an institution, can't afford to do this.
They're demanding a use of force document from the campus police. All right. So you want it in writing as to when a police officer is going to use his gun? By the way, should he get written permission from you before he does in the middle of an incident? These professors, I got to tell you something, it gives me a little bit of a squeamish feeling that they are out of lockstep with what the polls say the students want and what certainly parents want. And URI being the only state university that doesn't have armed police officers, enough's enough. Did you not see the Phantom incident last year where the reaction was quick, but there was no one to respond to somebody who might have had a gun? Have you seen some of the stories out there in other schools? You know. Anyway, let's just let this blow over and move to reason, because we have a day of reason coming up. Did you see this? This is the governor who proclaims a day of reason in Rhode Island. Here's the headline. And it's a proclamation. Let me read this to you. Can I read this to you? We'll show it to you. Here's, ready? Whereas the application of reason more than any other means has proven to offer a hope for human survival upon Earth by cultivating intelligent, moral, and ethical interactions among people and their environments. And whereas those who wrote the Constitution of the United States of America, the basic document for governing the affairs of humankind within the U.S., based it upon principles delineated within the philosophies distinguished, distinguish the historical age of reason. I can't read anymore. May 1st will be the Day of Reason. It's also the National Day of Prayer. Now, Link Chafee would say, oh, well, I support the Day of Prayer too, because he likes to play both ends in the middle. No, he actually likes to be an antagonist. Somebody locked him up in a locker in high school, I think. You know, just like locked him up and left him there on some kind of a prank. And I think he's been mad ever since. Because all he wants to do is bust your beans. Thank you, Steve. Bust your beans. 8 months, and we're done with him. Sounds reasonable to me. And finally, what's better than this time of year with the NBA? I can't watch NBA basketball until the playoffs. I can watch hockey all year long. But what's better than the action end to end? The Bees now with a 2-1 lead over the Detroit Red Wings. The Rangers, my team, don't send me hate mail, or feel free, doesn't matter. Your state of mind's open for discourse. The Rangers ahead of the Flyers. There's nothing better than the 2.5 hours of watching NHL hockey in the playoffs, and there's so much more to go. It goes to like Christmas or June or something like that. When we come back, Ted Nesi on all things like stuff we talk about. Stay with us. So again, I post this tweet conversation. Frankly, I don't like the tweeting conversations. You know, old dog, new tricks. We showed you this during the rundown. This is the NEA executive director getting after the Brown University professor on the theories as to whether Clay Pell is a stalking horse or a rabbit or whatever. But it's fascinating stuff, and everyone's got a theory. And this is the time of year as things start to heat up. Everybody in the talking head community has a theory, right?
That's
Ted?
right. Everybody does. Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dan.
And thanks for coming. And you have a thought on this that Professor Schiller at Brown was proffering the idea that, you know what, he's not a serious candidate, that the NEA is just kind of messing around with him, that he'll pull off at some juncture and leave a two-person race and they'll toss their support to Tavares?
No, I don't see that. I think they are in it to win it, to quote the old Hillary Clinton line from when she ran. I mean, I think you were talking about Bob Walsh when he did Newsmakers with Tim and I.
Pretty convincing argument he made in his own mind.
Well, you know what? And I think I will say I've covered Bob now for a number of years, and absolutely he's good at spin. He's good at putting the best case on his side's arguments. But Bob I usually find what he says in public is the best version of what he's actually trying to do. That's usually been what I've found with the pension settlement and other places. And I think Bob and other liberals who are with him on this think there's a path for Clay Pell to get out of the Democratic primary. And absolutely, has it been a rough couple months with the car thing? His polling has been weak. Sure, but they say, and you know, anyone who watched John Robitaille would say it's certainly possible for a candidate to you know, light up toward the end of a campaign. I think they genuinely think they want Pell to win this, and I don't really see them going to Tavares. I think people have always missed that Tavares was always much more of a ed reform type of Democrat than they ever wanted. In some ways, it never made sense that Tavares was going to be the perfect anti-GINA candidate for the unions. He just seemed like who they'd end up with, and now they have someone else.
Well, we got a squeeze play going. If the three of them end up down the wire, this notion that Clay gets 40%, I think, is a reach. But you know, let's not discount that the NEA has been very, very viable in Democratic primaries.
Absolutely.
Right? So, but you know, at some point, this young man's got to deliver. And I think the weirdness factor, I'm just going to say it, there's a weirdness factor about him right now, is going to be a real Achilles heel. I mean, we've had a weird governor in Governor Chafee. There's a weird thing about him. I think there's a kind of I don't know if we can do that again type of thing. That certainly, if by some chance he wins a Democratic primary, and I'm not buying in, a general, I don't know.
Absolutely, I think it's much harder for Clay Pell to make the case when he plenty of things about him will sound like a second term of Lincoln Chafee to folks. Pell's people resist that fiercely. They think Clay Pell has learned lessons from former governors like Bruce Sundlin about the importance of actually like setting a course and being clear about what you want to do and things, which people think Lincoln Chafee has not done. But you know, he's not your average 32-year-old. You know, I'm 29. He's just got a different way about him. There's the business with the car is the classic thing that hurts a campaign because an average person understands it and finds it odd.
And he can't break it down like the average guy. He can't say, look, you know, joke's on me.
Right.
You know, sometimes I lose my mind, and the story about me losing the car prior. You know,
and Michelle really yelled at me. You know, make it a person.
Just something that
Right.
offers some common ground. I refuse to believe that the voters don't want a little bit of that in this race. And frankly, I think this. You know, I'll go as far as to say I think the NEA is abusing this guy. I don't know who came up with the idea, chicken or the egg. Who said first he'd want to run for governor? But they're going to program him, and they're going to run him for their own well-being. And you know what? All's fair in love and war, in sport. And don't put anything past Bob Walsh, so we'll see. But the other thing, him suggesting that one of the other two might be well to get out before.
Yeah.
Did you read anything into that?
Sure. I mean, I don't think anyone expects Gina Raimondo to get out of the Democratic primary with the amount of money she's raising and, you know, where she is right now. She's all in. That would only leave Angel Tavares. I mean, I don't think he's talking about Todd Giroux. So I think that leaves Angel Tavares.
I've wondered about this in the past as to whether he'd go the whole way, but I think he's gone far enough to go the whole way, unless something crazy comes from the criminal investigations that impact City Hall if not indirectly to him, but I think there's a low chance of that.
Yeah, and when you talk to Tavares supporters, people who are with him, they say he's raising money better than the conventional wisdom would put it, and that he can stay viable. And again, I think for any, it's a little like in 2010 where, Ken Block, John Robitaille, Lincoln Chafee, every one of them, maybe to a lesser extent Ken Block when he was a moderate, had a clear way to tell themselves they could win this. And I think still three candidates, you don't need that many votes to come out on top and win it.
Interesting what Bob Walsh from the NEA said to you and Tim on Newsmakers this weekend, though. He predicted a Ken Block Republican victory.
Yeah. I think Mayor Fung has not been necessarily showing the strength that some Republicans want to see, base voters in the Republican primary. First and foremost, you never know who that's going to be because it's usually such a small electorate, so much depends on that. Ken Block is out, aggressively, putting ideas forward, going, yelling about different things that he doesn't like up at the State House and stuff like that. And Alan Fung is stuck mired in this police investigation, which is a mess.
Well,
he had
this other play though that interesting, on that. When he talked about Block winning, he's saying that Gina couldn't beat him. So this is this whole threat to Democrats. Guess what? We dislike her so much, we will peel off of her. We'll vote for Ken Block before we vote for Gina Raimondo based on pensions. I think that's phantom argument.
I agree with you. I don't see why. If Ken Block is running as a true Republican, I don't see why, in the end, teachers union members, we're not talking about the laborers or private sections, we're talking about people whose livelihoods depend on the government having a certain level of funding and certain rules and things like that. Ken Block is not casting himself as someone who's going to be a hero to teachers union members. So I think more likely is the idea that they would stay home in November, which could hurt Gina Raimondo. It's just so far away.
It's so far away. It's a marathon away in politics. When we come back, there's some other political stuff I find pretty interesting. Ted does too, and also a little quickie on what's going on with the investigation. Stay with us. Welcome back. Ted Nesi is with me. No introduction needed. 29? That's what some people went. 29?
Almost 30.
I don't even want to talk about it. He's young enough to be my son. Buddy Cianci, you said
I've heard of him.
Yeah, some people have. By the way, have you noticed this week the Journal put that editorial out, Portrait of a Criminal? I think they were way over their skis on that one. Look, it's history. Yeah. It's history. Portraits are history. There's no rule. There's no Hall of Fame. You can look at a portrait and say, hey, he was a good guy, he's a bad guy. It's a conversation starter. But they're way out over their skis, and they've created a war. He's done 3 straight shows, radio shows, beating the tar out of
Dan McGowan, my colleague who covers Providence closely, every day when they say, wow, Buddy in the Journal, how many rounds is this going to go?
I think it's going to go a long way. His health continuing to improve with his chemo. Word on the street is that he's definitely going to go. But you had some strong things to say about that.
Well, and I don't want to get into a war with Buddy Cianci myself. I'm smaller than the Journal as a guy, but I think it
shouldn't preclude you from speaking your mind.
It's obvious. I know, frankly, as a reporter, what reporter in Rhode Island doesn't want Buddy to get in? What a story! The comeback of Buddy Cianci, perhaps the best-known political figure in the last quarter century in Rhode Island politics. Suddenly, this will be a national story. We'll have people asking us about it all over the place. It's a great story to cover for the interest in the story. But I think, we just had a raid on the Rhode Island House Speaker's office and home, and he's out of office, and we've had a change there. If we re-elect a man who went to jail because of actions that a jury found were taken under his mayoralship in the fall, you can see the articles that are going to come out.
It's so funny. Yesterday on the radio, I asked the question, do you look back on Plunderdome with some kind of disgust or a little bit of nostalgia? And I'll tell you, the phones were 65, 70% nostalgic. Mm-hmm. That tells you that
absolutely
a lot of folks see it differently.
I've been struck, I didn't grow up in Providence. Obviously, I was from Massachusetts, close by. You heard the stories. You knew of Buddy Cianci. And, knowing the very sketch of his bio when I got here, the guy ended up in jail and everything else. Oh, he must be kind of a rogue, disgraced figure. Really just the opposite, particularly with, I would say, the generation that was in adulthood when he was running the city. They look, and I can't actually blame people either for however much you give blame or credit to Buddy Cianci for things. A regular average voter who looks and says, what was Providence like in the 1990s? What was Providence like in the 2000s? What is Providence like today? They're going to vote for the 1990s. And if he is the symbol of the 1990s, you can't blame a lot of people for saying, let's go back to the guy where we feel like the potholes are filled, the river's moving, the mall was going up.
Give me 30 seconds on the investigations. You got a gut feel as to when we'll know something tangibly about what the House Speaker is jammed up with?
You know, a lot of my knowledge on this comes from Tim White, because he's a lot more plugged in on the law enforcement side. Certainly the sense I get from Tim is that we're not going to be waiting forever for an indictment on this or some kind of action from law enforcement to tell us what's going on. I tend to think it's something to do with income streams that Gordon Fox was managing. Two of them, his personal finances, because they've gone to the city for records again, and he's worked for the city on and off, and then his campaign finances. He was the treasurer for that. He was in charge of the money in his campaign finance account, what was going on in there. But as always, as a reporter, we really don't know until they tell us.
Mm. Something tells me there's bigger fish to fry there still. Who knows? Everyone's got a theory.
When I find out, I'll report it.
On everything at WPRI.com and on Channel 12. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks.
29. Your state of mind.
Not for
come
long.
Back. Stay with us. Hey, your state of mind is important to us, as you know. This is how you get in touch with us. 228-1886. State of mind at myritv.com is the email address. And, of course, Facebook and tweeting and all that kind of thing at Dan York Show. Here's an interesting email from last night's program, a reaction. Paul says that Representative Macbeth, who is the oversight chairman of the oversight committee, with 38 studios and the like, he feels good about her. Says that she's got the poise and honesty to make it work. There she was last night. You know what? It's anybody's guess as to how that oversight process is going to work. But I would say that Karen Macbeth is built for it, no doubt. Got to go. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow on the radio at noon and on My State of Mind tomorrow right here, 7:30 and 11:30 on MyRI TV. Good night.